We have had so many people pass through the doors of Real Progressives. We have had more economists from around the world that have spent time with us here. And sadly, throughout the progressive movement, we have been met with resistance that you just wouldn't imagine from people who claim to want a New Deal. We have been met with people who claim that they want a New Deal, and yet when you explain to them how to do it, they absolutely rebuff you. And here's something else too. I want to show you this. Y'all don't hear about this guy very often, but he's one of my favorites. He's not a true MMT-er, so he gets some flack because he supports some things that don't really line up, but I like him anyway. His name's Rodger Malcolm Mitchell. He writes something called The Myth Fighter, and he says people believe the big lie because trusted sources like the media, the politicians, and many economists promulgate the big lie. What do you think the big lie is? We can have full employment by having a federal currency like we do. We don't want to have state currencies. That would be absolutely ridiculous because no other state would have to accept it, and that would just be kind of foobar, wouldn't it? But anyway, the big lie right here is the fact that taxes fund spending. That's the big lie. That is the big lie. And it's a big lie because, let's be honest, you hear taxpayers' money and you hear all of them running around talking about, well, we got to pay more. We got to pay more in taxes. I'm willing to pay more. Are you willing to pay more? I'll be willing to pay more any day just to give us that stuff. Let's go ahead and do that, right? So anyway, Bill Mitchell, I don't know if you guys remember Bill Mitchell. Bill Mitchell is one of my favorite guys. Bill Mitchell wrote this, and I think this is really nice. Bill Mitchell says, that statements are continually being made by economists and others about important matters of public policy, which are based on outrageously incorrect premises about how, the monetary system operates and the opportunities that system provides to the government policy choices. Folks, do you understand how many lies you're fed? And you just eat them up like it's fucking gravy, man. You just, yeah. And that's just got to stop. Folks, that's what we're here for, is to stop that phony ass narrative. I understand that anarchists fit kind of adjacent with progressives, that there's a movement afoot to try to blend progressives and anarchists. But let me just tell you this. Anarchists and progressives do not agree on everything. In fact, they don't agree on a lot of things, namely when you start looking at programs. It's very hard to have programs that provide Medicare for all, free college, green energy, student debt relief, paid family and medical leave, a job guarantee, you name it. It is very, very hard to get an infrastructure bill passed when you're busy ripping down the system that would ultimately make it happen. Now, obviously, we understand that for the last 40 years, neoliberalism has redefined what economics is. For the last 40 years, we have suffered under a neoliberal scourge that has caused all of us to question whether or not the system we have in place today could in any way, shape, or form sustain a progressive future. Let me just say this for the record. Whether you're in a socialist environment, or whether you're in a capitalist environment, or whether you're in a democratic socialist environment that blends the two, you still have currency. Okay? You still have some form of transaction, some means of transaction. You do, because resources are scarce. And a resource-based economy for a Star Trek era and for the Venus Project and all the other things that people like to lather over, I got to tell you, you could say what you want, but we have not been able to make people understand the fact that their federal tax dollars are deleted upon receipt. How in God's name are you going to convince every Democrat, every Republican, and half of the Greens that actually think, and the other half that is all out there in the woods ready to pick berries? How in the world are you going to convince all of them? And it's going to require a massive shift. How are you going to convince all of them to go and give up everything that they know today and just suddenly jump into this new world like that? It's not going to happen, period. It's not even like up for discussion. It is not going to happen. So that means that we have to transition to something better. It's not incrementalism. It's just an understanding that we cannot get people to understand that their precious tax dollars are freaking deleted. How in the world are they going to accept a whole new monetary system or lack of monetary system in some new world that won't exist because there simply isn't the will to make it happen? Okay, so we have proffered up that within the Overton window and beyond, actually, quite frankly, it's beyond, because people on the left can't get their head out of their ass, and people on the right can't get their head out of their ass, and people in the middle don't have any idea which way they're going, okay? Because of that, we're stuck trying to push these basic programs that will allow us to begin transitioning to a more equal society. We like to think of that as the New Deal Part 2. And it's like, how can you do that when you say, I don't like MMT? MMT furthers capitalism. When someone says that, you know that they have literally just shot your kid in the forehead and said, I don't want them to have anything nice. I don't want them to have Medicare for all. I don't want them to have a free college education. I don't want them to have their student debt eradicated. I don't want them to have paid family and medical leave, and I certainly don't want to pay for a jobs guarantee that would make sure that the 45,000 suicides every year are stopped. That's what I hear when I hear that, because there is literally not a chance in hell. Hear this, not a chance in HE double hockey sticks that your Venus Project version of the RBE, the zeitgeist, is going to happen. Not in this lifetime, I can assure you. So that leaves us with understanding what we can do to make lives better. So here's the deal. As we sit there and we look forward and try to understand what exactly does it mean to be a progressive? What does it mean to push for a progressive agenda? And how can we make that happen? It becomes very, very obvious that we need to understand who our opposition is as well. I'd like to say it's just the GOP, right? We just hate the GOP. It's just the right wing we hate, right? But it's not that easy. Sadly, it's not that easy at all. We have a fight with the GOP, and that is largely based on the idea that they won't raise taxes for anything, okay? So understanding that many of them are just sycophantic assholes that really, really just hate people, okay? We got to look at the people that do care, right? And so you know that the ones on the right that have a brain and do care are the ones that are sitting there saying they don't want their taxes going up. And they know that they have the Grover Norquist pledge in place that prevents Republicans from driving taxes up. Which, once you understand the role of taxation, you understand it is irrelevant. You know, we spend so much time in our lives trying to explain away why the Republicans robbed Social Security and raided the Social Security Trust Fund, and how Bush put wars on the government credit card, and blah, blah, blah. All these really, really boneheaded, horrific lies that, quite frankly, have hurt the Democrats and have hurt the left because we sound like idiots when we repeat it. Here's something that's very important. I'm going to put this meme up. I think this right here is very, very interesting. Stephanie Kelton says, this is why I have zero patience for Robin Hood politics. The sick, the poor, and planet wait while you chase gold coins in a fiat world. Stephanie Kelton has got about zero patience for the people out there saying, but what about devaluing my dollar? What about well, how are we going to pay for it? Right? Well, here you have Pavlina Cherneva coming up on the back end of that saying 100% in a fiat world, taxes don't fund federal spending. Pretending they do has led to a global self-induced paralysis. Do you understand what I'm saying here? How dare someone sitting at the fireside, how dare someone sitting there thinking that they know more than that? How dare they kill people by ignorance? How dare they step out and say, how are we going to pay for it? What about the debt and stuff like that? So I want to show you this right here. So they're sitting there, talking about all this nonsense. And Lindsey Graham is sitting there all of a sudden out of the blue while Puerto Rico is going crazy. Suddenly Lindsey Graham is trying to pivot to a bogus narrative about debt. And she says, I wake up every day to fight this bogus narrative. How dare you pivot from her real tragedy to a phony debt problem? Guys, a phony fucking debt problem. Do you think people should feel ashamed for peddling? I'd like to say that they don't know any better, but I actually think they do now. I really, really think they know better, and I really think they just don't want to learn. It just violates what they think should be the way it is. I'm going to show you something that Ellis put up a little while back so you understand how this goes. This is going back to May. And obviously, we were really, really working the Green Party over and have been working hard on the Green Party as well. We kept getting all these negative feedback from Green Party people telling us that we got to end the money system. We got to change it. We got to get rid of the monetary system. We got to end it. We got to do all these things. And the reality is that MMT is no friggin' crazy thing. It's just what it is. It's just what it is. It is a description of all fiat currency wherever it exists. And it would describe gold currency. It would describe any. But right now, it describes a sovereign, free-floating fiat currency. And when you see this, okay, we got this stop MMT from taking over the Green Party. This is not Ellis making those words up. This is a direct cut and paste from people. And so Ellis quite eloquently translated it. I don't want the Green Party actually accomplish anything for the people. I only want the Green Party to be a symbol of protest against the establishment. This is the kind of nonsense, sadly, that we are dealing with. Okay. And so when you think about that, okay, it's kind of like one of those situations where they're so in bed with the idea that they are going to have to just tear it all down. It's the only way they can diversify themselves, the only way they can change how people see them. They don't want to be seen as like the Democrat light or whatever. But you know what? This is the problem with Democrats. Democrats say, well, the Republicans say this, so we have to say the opposite. It doesn't even matter if the opposite is right. They just reflexively say that we got to do the opposite of what the Republicans say. Republicans say we got to tax. What do Dumbocrats say? Dumbocrats say, we got to raise taxes to pay for stuff. Hence the reason why Stephanie Kelton did her paper on we can get a pony. Okay? We can get a pony. We don't need to raise taxes. In fact, we have to do some homework to figure out whether something's going to be inflationary or deflationary. Take, for example, Medicare for All. Medicare for All simplifies a great many things. It takes a lot of the chaos out of the system. It takes a lot of the ambiguity out of the system. Well, what does chaos and ambiguity do in a business sense? They create opportunity to make more money, don't they? That's the speculative economy, right? Speculators going wild. They like that crazy chaos, okay? Well, all of a sudden, Medicare for All eliminates a huge amount of that. So what does that do for us? That creates a deflationary situation. All of a sudden now, healthcare is efficient. Healthcare is suddenly not a bunch of red tape. healthcare is suddenly easy. And now all of a sudden you're saying, well, we got to pay more in taxes to fund that? It's ludicrous. Medicare for all is actually going to turn out to largely be deflationary or status quo. There's no reason to raise taxes for it. But if you believe the mainstream narrative that we've got to raise taxes to pay for ponies, as Stephanie Kelton said, you realize that's a bunch of bullshit. You realize that really what you need is you need enough doctors, you need enough nurses, you need enough hospital beds, you need enough x-ray machines, you need enough of these very basic things that make up for the medical profession. It's not the pieces of paper that are the problem, although we've made it a scarcity of dollars as opposed to helping drive demand for new doctors and nurses and other medical supplies. Think about what happens once we add the demand. All of a sudden, doctors and nurses will have to get trained. We are going to have an uptick in medical jobs. It's going to be a huge swell right there. So I want to talk a little bit about why in the world we haven't gotten there yet, right? Part of it is this human nature of makers and takers and a genuine disdain for anything government, going back to Ronnie Reagan. You know, Ronnie Reagan taught the Republicans and the Reagan Democrats to hate their government. He taught them that it was like the government was always the bad guy. So he was always there to save the day from the evil government. Well, as we've seen here recently, our government can be quite evil. But that doesn't mean it has to be, right? We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, we have a bad president, we go ahead and try and find a better one, you know, provided the elections allow us to do so, right? But the fact is that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We know that government in and of itself is not evil. So what we've got to do is we've got to recognize that, and we've got to start uniting as people to put pressure on government. I don't care if it's a right winger, left winger, middle finger, I don't care who it is. We as people have to say that this matters. And they sit there and it's like you can almost see The Rock going, do you hear what The Rock's got cooking? And he's like listening for the crowd, listening to hear how loud they are. Are they loud enough? Do they really, really want Medicare for all? If it's like, yay, he's like, that's too disruptive. I'm not going to go ahead and make this big change on a yeah. But if you hear a yeah, you hear the crowd going wild, all of a sudden now, all those Republicans, all those Democrats have to step up and say, hey, I think we're going to have some unrest if we don't take care of this. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a good night, everybody.